I'm Benji Bower and I am here to tell you about my process in making the music for the production Monster Calls at the Old Vic and the Bristol Old Vic, directed by Sally Cookson. Anything else I need to say? Welcome to my little cave studio. You're not really allowed to be here, but as it's lockdown, I thought I'd let you in, so welcome, and excuse me because I'm not really used to doing this kind of stuff and find it incredibly awkward, but hey ho, here you go. I was very excited to hear that we were going to do Monster Calls for the next project, and when Sally told me, I instantly got infused and started writing music. I wanted to create a palette and a sound world that was a bit more electronic in vibes to what I'd done before, using a bit more synths. Again, using strings, which I love writing for. So sort of mixing a bit of the acoustic elements, but definitely having that glitchy, strange sound world in there. I began by going to West Wales in Pembrokeshire. A friend of mine has a woodland out there, and recorded some trees and recorded some new trees, and not hurting them, but just trying to get some sort of sound, not breaking the twigs or anything, and walking through the woodland and walking through the bush and the squelchy mud and the mulch and just the sounds and the atmosphere of the wood. I recorded them and then took them back to my cave and manipulated them and affected them so much that they sort of go far beyond actually sounding what they were, so that I could make a palette of, say, a drum beat, or I could make a palette of notes, so that I could build up a chord or a sequence. But for my knowledge, it was made of yew trees, which made it much more fruitful for me, I suppose. Also, I did use a lot of sounds of those twigs, the bush and the wood, for, you know, the monster effects and the kind of growing, and when the monster kind of is birthed. A lot of these I just put on my sampler and was able to manipulate it live, so that we had noises. I was also experimenting on getting really into sort of chromatic movements and block chords, and I always love a pedal note, love a bit of drone, love a pedal note, and I love a wonky chord change, if that makes sense, and so I was experimenting with stuff like this. You can hear that if it's coming out on this speaker, but just sort of moving through these chords, all with a pedal note. There's a pedal C just at the top, just sort of moving, trying to find home, or a kind of resolution which doesn't. This sort of then became the track that is Toast or Breakfast, the breakfast scene, which where Connor, it's sort of mainly movement, but it's where the sort of music first kicks in with the sort of electro vibes. Also, another element that's in this is and in the show that features very heavily is the vocoder. I mean, I love the vocoder. I love artists that have used it, like Herbie Hancock did a lot of stuff which was like dream funk stuff, yummy. But you know, people like Imogen Heap is the classic one. It's gorgeous, hide and seek. you know, James Blake and Bon Iver, and I was like, I want to do that. I want to try that. And also, not because I want to be them, but just because I wanted to have another element of something electronic and otherworldly. You can make them do sort of slightly spacey things, and the way I was using it is that I had it plugged into a MIDI keyboard, and I could play keys on my keyboard and sing through it, so the harmonies would be what I'd be playing on the keys. So it was very sort of experimental. And another thing that I should mention about the vocoder is that very early on, again, when I was singing, it became very apparent that it didn't actually need lyrics, and it worked better where there was no words. Maybe because of Connor's you know, his inability to be able to say what he really needs. So it was always this, I'm trying to say something. So I sort of interpreted that and took it into the vocoder. And again, on the first track, Breakfast, in the breakfast scene, and throughout the whole show, when I'm singing into the vocoder, I'm not singing anything, which made people sound slightly frustrating. But it was to do with Connor's not being able to sort of voice what he wanted to say. So that was interesting as well, sort of every night, and also just coming up with a kind of strange language and having to sort of sing into the microphone and go and try not to say any words or real words. Which is hard, but it worked well, and that was sort of used throughout the whole of the show. Sally was very keen to have very dynamic scene changes. There was the idea of having chairs either side of the stage, and there was these transitions where the actors would walk across and sit down and stand up, and she was very specific about it. It needed to be driving, it needed to be like cutting through, and so this is where the idea come up with for the kind of glitchy scene humps, which are sort of like a little cut in a film. And this was used with actually samples and that we recorded within the rehearsal room of all the actors very early on in sort of week 1 or 2. We got them to improvise various scenes, like just in a school, being teachers, being Connor's friends or bullies. And what I did is then take those samples, completely sort of random and you know, mistakes and incredibly funny. I would then take those, cut them up, and use that to create a kind of mixed in with some weird synthes, and no vocoder this time, but just for those scene humps, they were very much driven by these sort of glitchy and everyone would sit down. So that's that bit. I used a lot of strings in Monster Call's soundtrack. I recorded a sextet down in a studio called Invader Studios in Bristol. Brilliant. At Invader Records, amazing. Lots of soundtracks on there. Go and check them out. Really nice to work with them, experimenting within the studio. So got them to play one note, and then just sort of, you know, telling them to sort of bend or scrape or undulate the noise or the note freely. So, and also playing chord sequences that I'd sort of written that ended up being in the show, but just as a palette. So I had all these lovely noises that I could manipulate. Then I was able to take them. My idea was on stage that I could control them from like a sampler. What I actually used on stage was an Ableton Push, which is it's like a button pressy thing for a sequencer. I actually didn't use it as a sequencer, I just used it as literally as a button pressy thing. It's right here. So I forgot to say that helping me on this is my bro and long-time musical collaborator, and always been there with me in the theatre, and he was then doing lots of the drums, so I'd take care of the keys and he'd take care of the drummy doof-doofs. So he had a couple of drum machines and a guitar which was going through like an effects box of space and beyond. So that was the sort of setup. We also had a cello and a double bass, and this seemed to work well. So there's various bits of very sort of calm acoustic moments, and then we get into the electronic stuff and the drum beats, which I thought worked well for the piece. Apologies, I'm saying a lot. I can't help it. It's odd, but it's odd times. So we've got the live strings on the buttons and the arpeggios and the synths and the drum machines, all programmed with the strings and the tree beats, as we called them. And obviously the piano features always in all the stuff that I do, because I love it, and can be very emotional, and I love being able to affect live theatre on the piano. With the piano pieces throughout the score and for various scenes, there were themes that I was able to again allow them to breathe and to go with the actors really, and as they evolved and breathed with their characters, I could do the same with the soundtrack. Amazingly talented actors on the production, and some amazing singers, wonderful voices, so I wanted to utilise that. There's a scene called Berries, which is where Connor discovers the berries after the nightmare he had the night before, and we just wanted to experiment, and there's a phrase, a piano phrase that is sort of similar to the breakfast scene, and similar progression of sort of slightly chromatical, slightly wonky chords. We wanted each time of this phrase we wanted a soloist to just sort of pop up over the top, and in the same way of no lyrics and not being able to really voice what you want to say, so the phrase was just sort of coming out like from the heart, but not being able to sort of say it, which I thought worked really well and was lovely to be able to breathe and develop. And one of the scenes where we featured one of the actresses, Whitney White, as a soloist, was a scene that we musicians called The Fly, which is where Connor gets lifted up because he gets a bit of potential positive news about his mum's treatment. Again, using the piano, the arpeggio, and also the recorded strings that were on this hand. We then got Whitney to sort of improvise around a phrase that I gave her, and just one of those singers that we didn't really set something. It did end up getting set after 2 or 3 weeks, but it was always a moment in the show that I was kind of like looked forward to and used to sort of, from the position of where I was on the stage, which is upstage in a little hole in the back of the set, would always be able to clock Whitney singing it, and she'd be sat on the seat just singing it, and man, she'd just take off sometimes and like make me shake, because it was just new and so emotional, that she just, what I wanted her to do was just take it in there and bring it out, which is what she did very, very well. Another incredible singer, Nandi Bebe, sings the song in the second tail. This originally started off as a very slow song, done with the vocoder. When we got actually to rehearsals and tried it out, it was just not the right thing to do. It was too down and soporific. It was too. It needed to be up. It needed to be dynamic. Because we were getting near to the end of the first half. So we decided to throw it out, keep the lyrics, but throw out the music and change it all up, which is scary but very exciting sometimes and can lead to amazing discoveries, which it did, and it really works. And it was asking Dan Cannon, the movement director, for what kind of tempo do you want. He gave me a tempo and he's like, what kind of rhythm, or do you want a beat? And he kind of went doom 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 ka, not moving like that, but he did the rhythm. And so then we just took that and me and my bro wiggled with the idea and came up with the second tail kind of dance, and then putting Nandi's vocal on top, which is great. It worked really well and was an exciting phoenix from the ashes of something else. The second half of the show is sort of the descent for me, really, and it went like this into emotional land, and so I wanted to reflect that in the music. Early on, it was very important to Sally that we don't sentimentalise this and we don't get too mawkish with the music, because it's so easy to affect stuff like that in theatre and film, and spoon feed you or shove you, this is the moment you should be crying. So and it's very hard to do that in such a story, so very wary of that. But the second act is the time when everything hits the fan. When the show was finished, we definitely wanted to make, or I definitely wanted to make the soundtrack into an album, and had started that process as we were doing it, and we were recording various things of the Old Vic and the Bristol Old Vic cheekily on the stage, and went back into Invader Studios and recorded some things, and then got back in the cave and started to get to work. So the album is out, and hopefully there'll be links everywhere pinging up on your screen or somewhere down there, I don't know. But the album was specifically trying to be an extension of the soundtrack to the show. So it was trying to be an addition to the show, as I couldn't just do a straight, this is the soundtrack to the production that we had, because it would have been, for example, the school underscore scene would have been a minute of a little beat, which it would have been a very short album and a very boring album, and no one would really know what was going on. So I tried to keep the narrative and tried to feel like you're on a journey like the show without there being any text. I hope that comes across, but the album is very much an expansion of the soundtrack to the show, and also hopefully an addition to this incredible story. And it was very important for me to do, and also broke me again because I had to listen to all the screams and make it more of an album than a theatre show, and to make sense to me. So sonically it's a lot bigger, it's a lot fatter, there's a lot more going on. Some things are as they are, but I had to sort of develop, and as an artist I didn't want to just sit in the same thing. I wanted to sort of take the cake and eat more of it and bake another one. I hope I've given you a little insight into my process of how I wrote A Monster Calls. Apologies, can't stop saying and but I hope you enjoyed it, and I really hope you enjoy watching A Monster Calls. Fantastic actors. It was an amazing show to be a part of, an amazing project. It's totally ripped my heart out and changed my life in many ways, and I hope you really enjoy it. I also hope that you can maybe listen to the album as well, and I hope you enjoy that, and I hope that you are keeping safe and well, and sending peace and love to everyone in these times.